So we're kicking off this Tuesday edition of the SportsMax Zone with football. Action in Spain will be the first of the top 5 European leagues to start, as the Liga will get underway on Thursday with 2 games. Athletic Club versus Getafe and Real Betis taking on Girona, welcoming back one of the most watched leagues in world football. And of course, the place to watch all La Liga action will be your home of champions, SportsMax, for yet another season. And it's only right then that we give you a comprehensive preview of what is to come in the 2024-25 season. And who better equipped to give that preview than our global football correspondent, Juan G. Arango. Juan, welcome to the SportsMax Zone. Great to have you on.
Hey, how are you, Lance? How's it going? How's everything?
I'm fine. We're fine. We're all fine here at the moment, and we're always happy that we have La Liga live on the home of champions. Let me start here. What excites you most about this new season, which is approaching? Kylian Mbappe?
Yeah. Well, that's one of them. I mean, it's interesting to see that La Liga now is becoming the league of the... Well, remember 25 years ago when La Liga was always mentioned as the League of the Stars, correct?
Yes.
Well, it's mentioned as the League of the Stars, but the young stars, because obviously you still have Kylian Mbappe leading the way. You do have Jude Bellingham at Real Madrid. You have Lamine Yamal. You now have Julian Alvarez also doing his thing over at Atletico Madrid. And also seeing Girona, how they're going to react this season without Artem Dovbyk, without Savinho, and players of that ilk. And all 4 of them are going to start the season out on the road.
Yeah, focusing on Mbappe, because it was a floating story for so long about his status with PSG that there were points at which no one knew for sure that, you know, this Real Madrid move would actually happen. But because of his quality as a world-class player and Real Madrid's history of having world-class players, it appears at this point to be a good fit. Is there anything about this acquisition that you think may not be as rosy as it appears on the outside?
Let's wait and see if things don't go well. I'm talking about individually, and I'm talking about collectively as well. Not that one's saying it will. It probably won't, because based on how they played last year, barely anything went wrong for Real Madrid. But there's times that when things aren't going well for Kylian Mbappe, it ends up being a reflection, or he ends up reflecting it or deflecting it inside the dressing room. And at times it ends up being a lot of fodder and a lot of discussion, a lot of speculation, not just within the dressing room, but within the Madrid press. And that's what ends up being one of the big weaknesses when it comes to Mbappe being able to do certain things.
One of the things I wanted to ask about is that Mbappe and Vinicius play within pretty much the same spaces, right? With Vinicius being as dominant as he has been the past couple of seasons, how does this move, acquiring Mbappe, affect him? Does he move to the right? How does he position himself? How does he work within the team now, within the system?
You know what? That's a very good question. And it's something that I've been in discussions about lately, because does he play on the left? Because we're accustomed to seeing him a lot on the left, but then where do you put Vinicius Jr.? And maybe you end up kind of switching players off, because despite bringing Mbappe into the mix, you don't have a true number 9 still.
Exactly.
So does that mean that
Wow.
Where's the sound?
Yeah, we've lost Juan. Let's hope we get him back soon, because he was making.
No, or what I was saying was that,
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard me or not, that part was that it's a case of players rotating back and forth. And I think that's it, because there's not a true number 9 at Real Madrid. And I think it's going to be something that helps everyone turning around and being able to rotate.
Yeah. My other question is, does acquiring Mbappe see Real changing their style of play? Last season we saw them in some games sit back and beat teams and get teams on the counter. Now with Mbappe in the lineup, of course we haven't seen that since Benzema was there, but do they now go back to being a fully offensive team, or do you still see them playing this counter game when it's required, as opposed to being a full-fledged attacking team now?
This year, I think it's going to be a Madrid team that ends up being a bit more dynamic, because now it's not only just stopping Vinicius Jr. And I'm not saying anything mind-blowing or anything that ends up being completely, completely earth-shattering. But in terms of Kylian Mbappe, he brings in another threat. He brings in a lot of eyeballs, and they're going to have to be wide open in terms of all types of offensive opportunities that are going to start developing.
Yeah, you talk about eyeballs there, Juan, but I guess we could suggest that his debut, which we expect for Real Madrid in the Super Cup UEFA clash with Atalanta on Wednesday, which, by the way, will be live on SportsMax at 3 o'clock Eastern Caribbean time, 2 o'clock in Jamaica, will be something that will have a lot of eyeballs, because it gives an opportunity for us to see Mbappe in a Real Madrid shirt immediately before La Liga even starts.
Yes, and against a team that's also poised to, I don't know, maybe win Serie A, but a team that is going to have to play and be able to, I don't know, compete in Europe as well. So yeah, it's a good litmus test prior to when they started the season. Like I said, all the teams that ended up in the top 4 in this round ended up playing away from home. So for Real Madrid to be able to play a team like Atalanta ends up being a true test for them in terms of how they're going to start the season.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little about Girona, who played well for about 70% of the season last year before dipping toward the end. I know they've lost a couple of key players as well. But before we go there, Barcelona, Hansi Flick, their new coach, he's from Germany. How is that fit, and how is his presence likely to impact Barca, who are trying to resuscitate themselves?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. I have people in the background that are talking. So
I was asking about Barcelona and their new coach Hansi Flick, how well the German fits up with them, and the chances of them, resuscitating their image in La Liga.
That's a good question, because there's still a lot of question marks in terms of that. And yesterday's match against Monaco, you ended up seeing a lot of mental lapses. And mental lapses from some of the younger players, mental lapses from some of the veterans. Hansi Flick even said, look, against Valencia, we can't make these same mistakes because we're end up paying just as big. So it's going to be interesting. Also, the reinforcements that Barcelona haven't had. Of course, there was all the talk about Nico Williams coming in, wasn't able to. Luis Diaz is supposedly on the menu. Well, who knows if he'll be coming, and who Barcelona would have to give up, because knowing what they're able to do is huge to be able to do this.
Yeah, but there are some youngsters in the Barcelona setup that kind of excited their fans in the past season, and their growth, or their continued growth, if we look at the trajectory of their development, would be very, very, very influential to Barcelona's campaign this coming season.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I have a lot of people talking in the background, so I can't hear anything.
I was just talking about Barcelona with some youngsters who are at the stage of development, Juan, and the need for them to fast track their growth to help to boost Barcelona's efforts.
In terms of, there's going to have to be a lot of stepping up in terms of the young players, and that ends up being a huge season for them. The Pau Cubarsís, like I said before, Lamine Yamal, seeing how Gavi ends up coming, Pedri ends up coming back from an injury, that ends up being very key in terms of what they're able to do. And these young players, the thing with them, it's not that they came in a situation where they were kind of hand-led in there, that they were able to transition in. They were basically dropped in the deepest part of the pool, and they're trying to learn how to swim as they go. And they've been rather good at it. So in terms of it, there's been a lot of the learning curve has been much steeper for them.
Yeah. Is there anything, Juan, about Hansi Flick's coaching philosophy or his style that would give Barcelona fans encouragement that this partnership could flourish?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Like I said, still have people talking in the back.
I understand. Yeah, I was just asking about Hansi Flick's philosophy and his track record as a coach. If there's anything about his track record that would give Barca fans hope that, the partnership could flourish.
In terms of the partnership flourishing, mean, it's not just the partnership alone. It's a whole entire set of parts that have to also function. I mean, you can't solely demand everything on Lamine Yamal. He can only do so much. You can't demand that the back line, for example, and kind of straying off a little bit, in terms of Pau Cubarsí, he can't be the rock in the back line. You have to have collectively all 11 players on the same synchronicity, because what we saw against Monaco, that's a template of how things are going to be. It's going to be a very trying season for Barcelona. So, I mean, we can talk about partnerships all we want, but in terms of what ends up happening in terms of individuals, yeah, it's great. Lamine Yamal still has a learning curve that he has to still adhere to, and it seems unjust to go and force him or put him in a situation, or any of the younger players and their associations, as one of those that can end up being a difference maker.
To that point, with Hansi Flick working with a relatively young squad, of course, Dani Olmo comes into the squad as well, and Barcelona winning one title in the last 5 years. Does Flick, will he be under pressure to deliver right away, or will he be given time to embed his philosophy in this squad?
After yesterday's performance and hearing the crowd's reaction, I think the pressure's on already. And Dani Olmo, as much as he is a great contributor, was he exactly the thing that Barcelona needed? Maybe. I don't know yet. But in terms of looking at him as the solution, there's still a lot of holes in Barcelona. There's still a lot of problems in terms of Barcelona. And that ends up being a major problem.
He said something post-game yesterday, Juan, that they didn't play with their normal speed or normal combination, which on the face of it suggests to me that he is comfortable with Barcelona displaying their playing style similar to before he got there. Would that be what you take from that comment?
Yeah, and it's not only that, it's the betterment of said system. It's the constant improvement of it. Now, if there's something that Barcelona have done well, or at least Hansi Flick is looking to improve upon, it is the physical fitness of Barcelona. And that's something that also needs to be mentioned. But yeah, it does head in that direction of the continuation of the execution of a system, the tweaking of a system, and of course, the re-implementation of certain things going into the season.
One quick question before we go.
Sure.
Alvarez and, of course, Suarez comes in for Atletico Madrid. Does that make them a contender this season, do you think?
They're obligated to be a contender at this stage with the amount of money. And I'm not talking about just what they've done this season. What they've done in previous seasons and the amount of investment that they put into their squad is a major factor. Now, because Simeone has that short blanket, if you will. If you pull it up too high, you end up covering your feet. If you pull it down too low, you end up covering your chest. Because we remember the Simeone 1.0 version of Atletico, if you want to call it that way. It was a very highly defensive side, prioritized defense. It was all about defense, about Cholismo. Cholismo kind of loosened up a little bit in the past couple of years, and so did the defense. So where is the balance? And with players like Sorloth, with players like Julian Alvarez, what they do offer you is that first line of defense, if you want to call it that, because they're going to pressure up high. So it does help Atletico Madrid push themselves up the pitch a little bit more, but also maintain some type of semblance in terms of a defensive stance that could offer some solidity, that can offer some pressure, and more importantly, it can offer everything that can transition forward into an offensive motion in one clean swoop.
Yeah, and before we leave you, Juan, any quick comment on Girona's prospects for 24-25, given what we saw from them last season?
I mean, it was a wonderful. I mean, we covered them all season long, Lance, and we always talked about how great a story, the philosophy, but unfortunately, based on having City and having Girona in the Champions League, the one that ends up getting stripped is Girona. You have Savinho going to City. You have Artem Dovbyk that ends up going to Roma. You end up having all these key players last year that maybe Jan Couto's been talked about possibly leaving at one point or another last season, maybe even going into this season. So the question mark is, a team that performs so well, how do they end up performing when you have less players, when you have a thinner squad, and when you have more competitions that you have to cover? When I've seen that in the past, especially in La Liga, that those teams that end up overperforming, they end up doing very well in La Liga, they end up doing relatively well in the Champions League, end up struggling in terms of a relegation race in La Liga. So where do you end up, picking your battles at this point? We'll see what ends up happening with Michel Sanchez and company.
Yeah, Juan, as usual, always great talking to you on the SportsMax Zone. We look forward to La Liga kicking off on Thursday, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more similar chats in the coming weeks. Thanks, man.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
Great. Juan Giarango. We have a lot more to come on the SportsMax Zone, and we'll be back after the break.